Teresa, you don't understand anything. He doesn't love you. He just wants to use you, Patrick said. Teresa laughed. Rubbish. I don't know why you don't like Geoffrey so much, but he's a really good guy. I may be wrong, of course, but Patrick, come on, admit it. You're saying this out of spite. I'm even offended, honestly. I thought we had resolved everything, talked about everything. Why are you starting again? Patrick looked at Teresa. Of course, he had already talked and even decided that they would just be friends. How else could it be, if they had known each other since kindergarten? 5 years ago, Teresa had laughed at his confession of love and said, Patrick, you're crazy. We're like brother and sister. At least, that's how I feel about you. Patrick took offence and went to work as a shift worker. He was gone for about a year, then returned just to tell Teresa that he was willing to be just a friend. And what else could he do? He just couldn't be without her. Teresa always shared everything with him. He knew she wasn't getting married until she achieved something in her career. Patrick even teased her, saying that when she became older, useless to anyone but wealthy, then he would agree to marry her. But recently, Teresa shocked him that she was getting married. Patrick had a hard time holding back. It was good that she told him over the phone, but after a moment's pause, he asked, And who is this lucky guy? A local rich man? You wouldn't have agreed to anyone else. A year ago, Teresa had opened a small company that provides various services for businesses. The company, though small, brought in a steady income. Patrick knew that Teresa had plans to expand, and a strange thought even crossed his mind that she was getting married out of calculation to make it easier to develop her business. No, Patrick, you've got it wrong. He's just an ordinary guy. Really nice, Teresa corrected him. It's weird to call a grown man a guy. Let me guess, if you're 32, he's definitely over 40. Teresa laughed. Not at all, he's 25. What? Are you kidding? Patrick thought he must have misheard. He always thought of Teresa as a smart, mature woman. Teresa seemed offended. Why would I joke? Or do you think only pensioners can look at me now? You got me wrong. All right, it's your business. Will you introduce me to your fiancé? Of course, that's why I'm calling today. Today we have something like a wedding announcement. I'll be happy to see you among the guests. Patrick didn't like Geoffrey. In fact, none of Teresa's chosen ones would appeal to him. But Geoffrey, there was something about him. Patrick couldn't explain what exactly. He watched the man all night long and drew a few conclusions for himself. Firstly, Geoffrey hugged Teresa too frequently in front of everyone, as if he wanted everyone to believe in his sincerity. Secondly, he avoided looking people in the eyes. If you addressed Geoffrey, he would respond, but he would look anywhere but into your eyes. And thirdly, he waned to hang out too much. Everyone was tired of the party, and he still wanted music and champagne. Such people usually don't have any other interests besides having fun. But Patrick didn't say anything to Teresa at the party. He didn't want to spoil her mood. And today he only spoke up after Teresa said that she was taking care of all the wedding expenses because Geoffrey was having temporary financial difficulties. They argued so much that Teresa told Patrick not to come to her wedding and not to ruin her mood. Of course, she regretted her words, but when she decided to call him 3 days later, the subscriber was unavailable. Well, you've gone back to your backwards again. You should have gotten married. Maybe you wouldn't have time to be bitter then, said Teresa angrily and threw the phone away from her. She tried to calm down, reminding herself that the wedding was coming up soon, and she would have someone she loved by her side. And who loved her so much? Teresa had been with men before, but she had never experienced such strong emotions and feelings. However, happiness didn't last long. At first, Geoffrey was perfect. With him, Teresa couldn't be happier. But then, Geoffrey felt uncomfortable coming to her company because she was the owner and he was nobody. To solve this, Teresa made him her deputy. She began to trust him with deals and spent more time on herself. To give herself more opportunities, she wrote a power of attorney so that he wouldn't bother her every time. Geoffrey was grateful and almost worshipped her. When people started telling Teresa that Geoffrey was cheating on her, she simply brushed it off. In her opinion, something like this couldn't be true. One evening they were returning from a restaurant and Geoffrey was driving. A tragedy occurred when he didn't see a person in the dark. The bump was strong. Teresa hit her head and the panel cut her forehead, causing her to lose consciousness. When she woke up, someone was telling her, "Wake up already, you smell of alcohol." It took a moment for Teresa to realize that this was about her. She tried to explain that she had only had a little wine at the restaurant, and then she opened her eyes and saw that she was behind the wheel, and a black-covered body was lying in front of the car. She turned around and saw her husband talking to the policeman. "You know, my wife always gets behind the wheel when she drinks. No scandals help, and this is where it led to," he said to the policeman, who nodded in agreement and wrote something down. Geoffrey looked at her and then smiled, but Teresa squeezed her eyes shut. This couldn't be happening. Her husband never visited her once. During the court proceedings, he spoke so terribly about her that the kind words of others were drowned out. As the condemned Teresa was being led out, she turned to look at her husband. At first, he smiled, but the longer Teresa looked at him, the less happy his face became. Something in the wife's gaze made Geoffrey tremble slightly inside. A year passed. "Teresa Harmon, pack your belongings for departure." Teresa got up and gathered her things. She didn't believe until the end that they would release her. As the gate slammed shut behind her, she closed her eyes and cried. Lord, was she really free? Teresa learned from rare letters from former friends that Geoffrey had sold everything she had during the year. Well, it was her own fault, because she had signed the power of attorney with her own hands. He stayed in the city for some time, and then went to the sea with a young mistress. All this time, while her sky was divided into cells, Teresa believed that someday she would be free and would devote all her time to searching for Geoffrey. Even if it took her the rest of her life, she would definitely find him. Teresa didn't even know what she would do when she found him, but finding him was vital. She would decide then. "Teresa?" The woman opened her eyes abruptly and stumbled. Patrick was standing near the prison gates. Her Patrick. He was the same, only his temples were completely grey. It was strange. How did he manage to turn grey like that? She ran to him, and he picked her up and hugged her. "Patrick, I thought I'd never see you again." The man carefully put her down. "Don't even hope. I'll always be around." Teresa reached out and stroked his grey hair with her fingers. He chuckled shyly. "I turned grey while you were gone." Teresa burst into tears and Patrick had to give her water. He took her to the nearest town, where he had rented a hotel room. "I arrived just 2 hours ago. Anyway, please make yourself at home. There's a bathroom. I'll go to the store. We should celebrate this occasion." Teresa lost track of time while soaking in the hot, fragrant foam. It felt like only 5 minutes had passed when Patrick cautiously stuck his head into the bathroom. "You haven't fallen asleep in there, have you? Look, I bought something. Hopefully it will fit. And please hurry up a little. I'm already setting the table." Teresa opened the package. The lingerie was beautiful and soft. There was a snow-white robe and something else, but that was for later. Currently, she was content with what she had found on top. Geoffrey paced back and forth. He didn't like how Andrea was behaving. He had been there for her all this year, but as soon as he mentioned the need to start living more frugally because they were running out of money, she rolled her eyes and started being rude to him. Recently, he decided to talk to her. "Andrea, don't you think you're not acting very nicely? I'm waiting for you at home and you're out somewhere." She lazily looked at him. "I was at a restaurant." "But we could go somewhere else together." "Where? To the park?" "You don't have enough money for a decent restaurant." Geoffrey flared up. "So you're with me just for the money?" "No, I'm with you for great love," Andrea laughed. "Just like you were with your wife. You know, Geoffrey, you should find out if she's available. Maybe she can help you start another company. You can't do it yourself because you don't have enough brain." Honestly, Geoffrey wanted to hit her, but he knew he wouldn't see her again if he did. "Andrea, Geoffrey, stop whining. A man shouldn't whine," she said, and left the room while Geoffrey looked at the door and clenched his fists. After a week, Andrea left without saying a word. She just packed her things and left silently. He tried to stop her and even shed a tear, but the girl didn't even look at him. Another week later, he was asked to move out of the apartment. It was a rental and Geoffrey hadn't paid for it for 2 months. He had no choice but to find a job. However, when he found out how much they paid in this town, he couldn't help but laugh. Taking out his last bit of savings, Geoffrey decided to return to his hometown, where he at least had a small apartment of his own. The city greeted him unfriendly. Geoffrey pulled up his hood and headed towards his house. The apartment smelled of dust, mould, and a thick pile of bills that needed to be paid. He gathered the papers and angrily threw them on the table. Then he walked around the rooms. How miserable it was here. Yes, lately he had gotten used to luxury. Here it didn't smell like it. The entrance door creaked, probably swayed by the wind. He headed to the hallway, but unfamiliar people were already entering the room. Geoffrey stepped back, and when he saw who came in the end, he even stumbled. Teresa? She was even more beautiful, slightly thinner than before, but that's understandable. She wasn't on vacation. "Didn't you recognize me, hubby? I came back and wanted to get those keys to my house and my company," Teresa said. Geoffrey understood that all these people came with her for a reason. "Teresa, they made me. I swear to you, I loved you very much, but they threatened me with such things that I couldn't resist." Teresa smiled affectionately. Geoffrey shuddered at the sight of her smile. There was some familiar guy standing behind her. Exactly, she had introduced them once. This was some childhood friend of hers. "And who are they?" Teresa asked. "What do you mean?" "Your envious competitors, of course." "And what did they threaten you with?" Teresa asked. Geoffrey didn't have time to come up with an answer, because 2 men in uniform entered the room, bringing with them an elderly stranger. "Look closely at him, please," one of the men said. I remember him well, said the elderly man. I was walking by and saw him dragging on an unconscious woman. I said to him, "What are you doing, shameless one?" He told me to walk quickly and not say anything, or he'll find me and kill me. Where did he drag her? Asked one of the policemen. The elderly man pointed at Teresa. There she is, by the way. He put her behind the wheel. Yeah, no matter how long the rope, there's always an end. Geoffrey howled and rushed towards the door, managing to break through. However, people were waiting for him outside the door. They twisted him so roughly that he cried out in pain. It all repeated like a dream, only this time Teresa was sitting on a bench for witnesses, and Geoffrey was where he was supposed to be a long time ago. They accused him of many things: the death of the man who died under the wheels of his car, fraud, conspiracy, and resisting the police. Geoffrey understood that, as a young and healthy person, he would not see this world again. When the guards were taking him away, Teresa met his gaze. She was smiling now, but Geoffrey's gaze was extinguished, and he quickly turned away. Patrick hugged Teresa by her shoulders. Well, that's it. And now we're going to the registry office to get married. Teresa turned around, kissed him on the nose, and said, Of course we are. Patrick exhaled loudly and pulled her by the hand towards the exit.